For many people, fuel prices are something they notice almost every week. You drive past a gas station, and the numbers change, sometimes slowly, sometimes suddenly. But what many people don't fully realize is this: fuel prices don't just affect transportation. They affect almost everything: food, clothing, electronics, housing, even services, because fuel is not just something individuals use. It is a fundamental input in the entire economic system. When fuel prices rise, the effects do not stay in one place. They spread quietly, gradually, but consistently. In this video, we are going to break down exactly why that happens, not with assumptions, but with clear economic logic. We will explore how fuel is used across industries, why transportation costs matter so much, how production costs increase, what cost-push inflation really means, and how these changes eventually affect everyday life. Because once you understand the mechanism, you begin to see the pattern everywhere. Let's start with the most important idea. Fuel is a foundational input. Fuel is not just a consumer expense. It is an industrial input. Modern economies depend heavily on energy. Fuel powers transportation systems, manufacturing processes, agricultural machinery, supply chains, construction. Equipment without fuel, goods do not move. Factories do not operate efficiently. Food does not reach markets. This means fuel is embedded in almost every product and service, even if you never directly see it. When the price of fuel rises, the cost of operating these systems increases. And when operating costs increase, businesses must decide how to respond: absorb the cost or pass it on. In many cases, especially over time, costs are passed on to consumers. Transportation, the first transmission channel. The most immediate impact of rising fuel prices appears in transportation. Every product you buy has traveled. Raw materials are transported to factories. Finished goods are shipped to warehouses, then delivered to stores or directly to customers. Each step requires fuel: trucks, ships, air cargo, rail systems. When fuel prices increase, transportation companies face higher operating costs. To maintain profitability, they often increase shipping rates. These increased costs are then passed to businesses and eventually to consumers. This is why even products that seem unrelated to fuel can become more expensive, because they depend on transportation at some stage. Production costs increase. Fuel is also used directly in production. Factories require energy. Machinery requires power. Heating and cooling systems consume energy. Some industries are especially energy-intensive: steel production, cement manufacturing, chemical processing, food processing. When energy costs rise, the cost of producing goods increases. This creates pressure on companies. If profit margins shrink too much, businesses may increase prices. This process is gradual, but widespread across multiple industries. Agriculture and food prices. Food is one of the most sensitive sectors to fuel prices. Agriculture depends heavily on energy. Fuel powers tractors and harvesting machines. It is used in irrigation systems. It is required for transporting crops. In addition, Fertilizers are often produced using energy-intensive processes. When fuel prices rise, farming becomes more expensive. Fertilizer costs may increase transportation. As food becomes more costly, these factors can combine to increase food prices over time. This does not mean immediate shortages, but it can lead to gradual increases in the cost of groceries. Cost-push inflation explained. Economists use the term cost-push inflation to describe this process. It occurs when the cost of production increases and businesses raise prices to maintain margins. Fuel price increases are a classic example. They affect multiple layers of the economy at once: transportation, production, agriculture, logistics. When all of these costs rise together, the effect can spread widely, unlike demand-driven inflation, which comes from increased consumer spending. Cost-push inflation originates from the supply side. This is why fuel prices are closely watched by economists and policymakers. Supply chain amplification. Modern supply chains are complex and interconnected. A single product may involve multiple countries and production stages: raw material extraction, component manufacturing, assembly, distribution. Each stage involves transportation and energy. When fuel prices increase, costs can accumulate at each step. This creates a compounding effect. Small increases at each stage can result in noticeable price changes at the final consumer level. This is why inflation can feel widespread even if the initial cause seems specific. Business decision. Making businesses do not always raise prices immediately. Some may absorb costs temporarily, especially in competitive markets. However, if higher fuel prices persist, businesses face long-term pressure. They may respond by raising prices, reducing production, improving efficiency, changing suppliers. Each of these decisions has broader economic effects. For example, reduced production can limit supply. Limited supply can increase prices. This creates a feedback loop. Services are affected too. It is not only physical goods that become more expensive. Services are also affected. Delivery services rely on fuel. Travel costs increase. Maintenance services face higher material and transport costs. Even businesses like restaurants may face higher costs for ingredients and utilities. As a result, service prices may gradually increase as well. Consumer impact. For households, rising fuel prices can create multiple layers of financial pressure. Direct costs increase. Fuel for personal vehicles becomes more expensive. Indirect costs increase. Food, goods, services. Over time, this can reduce purchasing power, especially if wages do not increase at the same rate. This is why fuel prices are often closely linked to public concern about the cost of living. Why the effect takes time. One important point is that these effects are not always immediate. There is often a delay. Contracts may fix prices temporarily. Businesses may absorb short-term increases. Inventory may have been purchased at older prices. But over time, if fuel prices remain high, the effects become more visible. This delayed impact is why inflation sometimes appears gradually rather than suddenly. Economic adaptation. It is also important to understand that economies adapt. Businesses may improve efficiency, Shift to alternative energy sources. Optimize logistics. Governments may adjust policies, subsidies, tax changes, strategic reserves. These adjustments can influence how long and how strongly fuel prices affect the broader economy. Conclusion: fuel prices are more than just numbers at a gas station. They are a signal that influences the entire economic system, because fuel is embedded in transportation, production, and daily operations. When its price rises, costs ripple outward from factories to supply chains, to stores, and eventually to households. This does not mean that every price increase is caused by fuel, but it does mean that fuel is one of the most important drivers of widespread cost changes. Understanding this helps explain why inflation can feel interconnected, and why changes in one part of the economy can affect many others, because in modern economies, everything is connected. And when one foundational cost rises, the effects rarely stay in one place.